Welcome. I'm Brandon Thielk, a performance and life coach. I am joined by longtime client Holly Deschenes. And today we're going to be talking about the art of acceptance. Acceptance is a super important concept when we try to gain momentum to move forward. Many of the things we get hung up on are because we're stuck in the past and it's we're not accepting them. So it creates a lot of resistance to move forward because part of us is really kind of left in this idea of something shouldn't have happened or it should have happened differently. And we all know we can't change the past. What we can do, though, is we can shift our relationship with the past, which is going to free up our mind to move forward. So, a super important concept when we're talking about personal growth, trying to accomplish new things, trying to break the cycle. This acceptance is really facing reality so that we can build off of our current reality. So, Holly, when you think about acceptance, I guess, where do you feel like in your own journey you've really gotten stuck where maybe you were just like, oh, I wish things would have gone differently, and you've had a hard time moving past that?
Sure. I can think of a few places where you get stuck or hung up on something from a professional setting where presented something or set something up in a certain way and it fell flat. Getting stuck in that place of, well, I should have done this or I should have done that, or I wish I would have added XYZ or
Hmm.
provided additional data. Um, I can also think about it from a more specific example in the past life, and Brandon, you and I have talked about this, but when I used to train horses, there was an element where I would look back and get stuck in sort of the romantic side of it, right? It could have
Hmm.
been what could have been had I not sold that horse and had
Yeah.
to do XYZ instead of what I did.
Hmm. Yeah, there's many moments, it could be like relationships we hang on too long, right? It could be, yeah, career moves where it's like ultimately we have to view life as this ongoing journey and we need these different experiences to learn from. And so acceptance is a very important part of moving past the things that we wish would have gone differently. And so what I like to do, it's really about like zooming out and looking at the grand scheme of things. We get into these snapshots of this would have gone differently, that would have changed my path. But we always want to just take a look at it and be like, well, it happened. So there's not much I can do about that. But the important question is, what can I learn from it? And that starts to unwind it where we start to see a purpose in the problem or the situation that's unresolved. And so, with this work, we're always trying to resolve these past equations. It's simply a balancing act. We're reconciling things that emotionally we've left in a negative place. And so, it may have not gone the way I wanted it to, but these things can be powerful redirections for us. They can be incredible learning experiences. And so we want to really drop out of a perfectionist mentality or things needing to go a certain way to be happy. Those are all those things that keep us stuck in the past. And then we basically form these loops where it's very difficult to move forward. And because we're not moving forward, we're not able to connect to a brighter future. We're not able to connect to inspiration or new ideas because we're hung up on this old thing that we thought was going to solve all of our problems, right? And so that's the key there is we look at it as like an ongoing process where these are learning lessons. And so this idea of acceptance is it's not saying I'm not disappointed that it happened. It's not saying, it's allowing for all the experience to unfold. Because if we just leave it in the negative state, we're not extracting the wisdom that we're supposed to gain from that experience. And so that's this resistance to change starts to happen when we get stuck in the past. I basically put so much value on one thing that I can't see my life moving forward without it. You give two people the same problem and they're going to treat it very differently, and it's really going to
Sure.
be which person got stuck with it, right? Which person put so much value or emphasis on that experience that they've made it's been impossible for that person to move past it. And I would argue that person's not really living their life anymore if their dominant mindset is stuck in these past moments of letdown, disappointment. We could even call those things failures. There's different ways we interpret it, but ultimately it's like we have to trust that there's a bigger picture at play, that there are things for me to learn from the experience. If it's painful, that just means that it meant a lot to me, right? Maybe it bumped up against one of my values or it made me question myself or doubt myself at a core level. And so it's really this catalyst for some deeper questioning, some discovery about self to try and figure out, like, well, yeah, if this hurt me so bad, basically I want to build myself to prevent that pain in the future. And so I need to unwind it and I need to learn from it so that I can navigate my life a little bit differently. And that may be reassessing who I believe I am, what I want out of life, those types of things. It can create some big questions in us if we allow that process to unfold. But if I just keep my mind running on the old track, there's really nothing that happens, but it continues to generate this negative story about myself where it's making it impossible to be optimistic to move forward because it's that's where we're going to form a lot of those pessimistic thoughts of like, oh, I really like tried for something and it didn't work out, and so now I believe that dreams can't happen or I can't be successful or whatever it is. So what stands out to you as I'm talking about this, Holly?
So, thinking about acceptance, it can be such a catalyst to being able to move forward. But I think about sometimes the getting stuck in the resistance is the romantic side of it, right? Or it was better then. And so I don't want it to
Hmm.
change because I loved this thing about the past. What if it is not necessarily a negative painful, that it's more painful in the moment of the loss of this thing that I loved or cared about
Hmm.
or saw myself as, right? To your point of sometimes you have to rethink who you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's this foundational, I put so much stock in something, or I had this direct focus where I could really build towards something. And so it established a purpose for me. And so if I feel like the rug got pulled or I don't know what's next, right, that's going to be an easy place to get stuck of yeah, I was banking on this working out, or I put so much time and energy in this. You'll see this a lot with relationship, right, where somebody
Sure.
invests a lot of time and energy into a person, and then if it doesn't work out they view the whole thing as a loss. That's not the reality of the situation. Everything is an ongoing opportunity for learning lessons and growth if we see it that way. We have to view it as, okay, I went through this experience for a reason. I was attracted or bound to this experience emotionally. And so there's information there, things for us to learn about, like why did I stay in this situation so long? Or why did I romanticize it? Why did I see it as this like ultimate thing for me? And with this work, all we're trying to do is shift it to this process-oriented, ongoing process of bigger and bigger things that so we can keep progressing and building throughout our life. And so there should be no one thing that's make or break you, because that's we're going to have very low resilience in that place of like, oh, if this didn't happen, I'm just going to give up. And so we need to develop that mental strength of seeing the purpose in everything, seeing the point of the pain. The pain's there to teach us, and it's designed to help us grow if we can move through it. And so, if we leave it in the painful place, and then we build avoidance patterns around it, and we pretend like it didn't happen or don't look at it, we've basically left our mind in that dominant thought process as if we were still pursuing it. Right. So I'm refusing to let go of it, and in that process, I'm stuck in the past, and my mind's feeding me rather than the optimism of I'm trying to make this happen. It shifts to this didn't happen, and now it's this inward, uh, hypercritical, self-sabotaging mode where
Yeah.
I'm just replaying the regret of what went wrong, what could have gone better. And so if we shift to this idea of going like everything is an ongoing process, the example you gave of work events, wishing you would have done a presentation a little bit different, like that's just giving ourselves permission to evolve and make mistakes. Like I realize now that I did this, I could have done these aspects better, and now I can focus in on that and I can develop that stuff. That's really the main shift, is rather than beating up on myself for things not going as planned, I see it as an ongoing evolving plan that through each experience I'm going to gain more information about how to refine it and make it better. And things only really stop when I give up, right, when I'm like,
Right.
okay, I failed or I'm no longer doing this. And once again, that's like, well, many goals, it's like we need the goal to grow and become somebody different, but oftentimes the goal doesn't really matter. Whatever we were fixated on the outcome about, as we get closer to it, we might realize we might not want that anymore. right? And so we're also
Sure.
giving ourselves that wiggle room and permission to change our mind. So I'd say resilience comes from a flexible, adaptive mind, and that means being in tune with yourself on a daily basis. Not, I decided I wanted this 10 years ago, and the closer I got to it, I just forced it to happen, even though I didn't even care about it anymore, right? And so
Right.
it's giving ourselves that freedom to become something different, and then also shift how we're seeing situations, because that's really a big marker of growth, is a change in perception. And so if I have the same mindset now as I did 10 years ago, that means not much has happened, right? I haven't had some new thoughts, new inspiration, new ideas coming in. And so I'm kind of hung up in this area. And so my job is, through acceptance, I can free myself up. And so acceptance just means, okay, I thought this was supposed to happen a certain way and it didn't. And so I'm going to face the reality of it, and as I go into that work and accept those aspects that were disappointed, let down, I might have some grief and sadness associated with that too. I might have some anger, right? I might feel like some people contributed to my failure. Like maybe I might want to go to blame some people or make excuses,
Sure.
things like that. So there's so many different avenues here. So the key is always, how can I bring this back under my control? And so that is that, okay, this didn't go the way I wanted it to, so I'm going to take a deeper look at it and I'm going to accept everything I had power over, right? And yeah, of course, as I'm going about my business, I am going to be interacting with other people, and they may have contributed in one way or another, but still, how can I take those aspects and bring those under my power so that I can transform them into something useful? So if I was romanticizing a person, okay, so yeah, why was I overlooking their red flags?
Sure.
Why was I
Yeah.
not paying attention to the things that they were showing me? Why was I seeing it differently than it actually was? And so when we're not accepting things, we are more apt to have delusions and be out of touch with reality, and be in that romanticizing. And so that just means like I'm projecting my hopes and dreams onto this person. Okay. And I think they're going to come in and solve all these problems for me, but it's always an internal process. It's always an inside job. If I view this person as like they're going to save me, or they're going to love me the way I've never felt love before, or anything like that, it's going to be, well, why don't I feel love internally? Why don't I accept myself internally? Right? We want to get back to these core pieces of, I want to be strong within so that I can be in tune with reality, where I'm not having to escape my reality.
Sure. You made me think of sort of a personal example, but I'm wondering if in your work, if you find this sort of thing common, particularly in your work with athletes. So I remember when I sort of set this goal to run this 50-mile ultra marathon, and I had this idea in my head about who I would be, right, when that thing was done, what would
Hmm.
happen at the end of that goal. And so one of the things you made me think of was how in this idea of acceptance, it maybe it's a person, but it could be that you have tied yourself to a goal that you think will change you
Hmm.
when actually it won't.
Yeah, and so in these cases, we often see what we classify as like desperation, right?
Sure.
I've put so much stock in this one idea that it's going to completely change or transform me. So even if I do achieve it, I'm going to realize that there's something else now, right? And so, these things are kind of a trap, in terms of, they're useful in terms of, it's a powerful source of motivation of like, oh, if I get there, one, I'm going to work really hard at it and I'm going to do everything in my power to make it happen. And so those are going to develop some good character traits, and some discipline and some work ethic and all those things. But then it is almost always the situation where once I get there, I realize that I'm still the same person, right?
Yeah.
And so it's that realization that, yeah, I want to have some healthy things that I can aim towards and that are going to fuel my growth. But ultimately, I want to continuously be finding peace with myself every step of the way. So I need to be happy with myself. I need to have some self compassion, some self love, like regardless of what's going on externally. Because if I'm looking to the results to define my worth or my value, that's always a losing game, right? Because it's really often the externals a reflection of our internals. So even if people are giving us the praise, or, we're getting the celebration on the outside, that can feel empty on the inside still, because we haven't gone to the core of that, right? And so all these things tend to be fleeting because it's just like, oh, I thought this would be amazing and I got there, and now when I'm sitting alone, I still feel the same way. And
Right.
so that's just a cue that, hey, there's some things in my past that I probably need to look at. And that's going to be an internal job to discover, okay, like, why do I feel this way? And generally, there's going to be some negative self beliefs about ourselves. And we're going to view that I'm only valuable if I achieve. So high achievers, you often see this. Those are the kids that wanted to please their parents, and so they got really good grades, like, even if they didn't care about school or whatever it was, right? It's like there's all these carrots we follow to be like, well, yeah, if I get there, I'll get the praise or I'll get the love or I'll get whatever it is. But if we weren't given that growing up, or if we had very conditional love where we only got praise or love when we did what other people wanted us to, that's where it kind of creates those voids of never being happy, never being able to please other people. I'm only loved if I'm somebody I'm not. All these important ideas create those feelings of it creates basically this void inside that I have to abandon myself in order to get those things. And so that's kind of it creates this hole. And so we want to fill that with I'm good just as I am. Like, of course, I'm going to be expressing myself if I live, right? So I'm going to have to channel that in some way. So that may be through a job and maybe through an achievement. But we want to be okay whether or not those things happen, all right? Because we can't always control that. We could put our best effort forward. We can train forever and we could still lose the race, right? And if we're not putting things in that proper frame, that's where we really latch onto things. That's where we really build these negative stories about ourselves. And that's kind of where we see the desperate mode, because I've attached so much value to the achievement of something that I feel really not good inside if I don't do that. And even if I do that, I'm still going to feel those similar things because it's inside. And so we go inside to transform that. And so that just means taking a look at the past and trying to heal some of these aspects of ourselves that was really, these are painful events that we've stored a long time ago. And from that, we often build the big goals and the big dreams and all those things is I need to do this to prove somebody wrong. I need to do this to validate my worth. We want those as tools for development, but along the journey, we want to transform it into something healthier that's not based on a negative self perception.
Okay. So if we're moving through any of these different things we could get stuck in, it's the achievement of a goal, it's a relationship, it's a job, it's a whatever. How are we accelerating things when we're able to move from the stuck place or the resistant place into the acceptance?
How do we accelerate the process?
Well, I'm thinking, let me rephrase that. How does it accelerate, right? So if you are stuck and you are moving into this place of acceptance, it can feel like it jumps things forward or it
Hmm.
pushes things forward in a more positive way.
Yeah.
How does that show up?
Well, yeah, so it's really going to be this willingness to move forward. And we had a little bit of a conversation about this today. It's like it's our attachment to the past or certain ideas that we're very fixed on that prevents us from moving forward. And so as I get to a place of acceptance, being like, oh, this happened, there is going to be a grieving process with that. So there is like a little bit of a death or a loss going on. And so we want to go through those feelings, and we want to come to terms with reality. Okay, and that might mean something didn't happen or somebody's not in our life anymore. And so as I get to the bottom of that, I'm always going to kind of rebound to this idea of a choice, and I'm excited for this next chapter, right? I'm going to Once I go through the emotions, I'm no longer trying to push against it and pretend it didn't happen. It's more of I went to the depths of it, and now I feel more calm and balanced about it, where I'm going to be able to rebound and I'm going to be able to refocus on something brighter in the future, right? So it is a little bit of a full circle where I'm going to be in this place of almost denial, but then as I drop into that, I might get a little bit softer to be, oh well, it kind of sucks that it didn't happen, right? Not
Right.
like it's more of it sucks that it didn't happen, and so we keep following that until we get to the place of it's okay that it happened. This was a powerful learning lesson for me, and it really changed my approach to things. It really changed how I relate to this idea of, well, there are no guarantees in life, and there are always going to be letdowns. And so that's the nature of life. Is sometimes we're given what we need, not what we want sometimes, right? And so it's that understanding that we only know a small portion of the journey. We don't know how things are going to turn out long term. And so it is this always this shifting to make the best of situations. And it is feeling it all. It's like being okay. Yeah, I am disappointed. I am upset. I did wish it went differently. But then, eventually, if we want to move forward in life, we have to get to the place of, okay, it happened. So now how can I use this to propel me forward? How can I use this as a source of motivation? Or, a lot of times coaching's a big one where it's generally, based on the pain I experienced as an athlete, now I teach people about how to move through these things faster,
Right.
and it's to basically prevent them having to go the depths that I had to go to get on this other side, right? And so it's really an accelerator to have somebody that's gone full circle with these experiences. Many athletes, when they go to retire, they don't know what's next, and it is a depression, right? They don't know
Right.
who they are without it. And so now we need to rebuild an identity. Before you can do that, you have to fully let go of the past. Like, you have to get to that place where it's healed. You learn the lessons from it. You can forgive whoever was around it. And, forgiveness is probably the last step. It's first coming to terms with yourself and what this new reality is. And then it may be forgiving parts of yourself or other people. Oftentimes it's ourselves. Maybe we feel we betrayed ourselves or didn't give it all we had, or something of that nature. And so there's a little bit of regret there. And so it's just allowing yourself to fall into those feelings, move through them, and not judge them every step of the way, because it's okay to feel that way. It's natural to feel that way. Anytime you invest a lot of effort into something, sometimes a lot of money too, things like that, I feel like this investment should pay off. But that's the thing, the gold's in there, all the value and wisdom is in there. We just have to go through it. And then that's really going to transform who we are, where we're going to show up differently because of that. If we're not doing that, that's where we have a lot of bitterness, resentment, a lot of negativity, pessimism. It's going to be around this idea of, I had something I really went for, or something I really cared about, and it was taken away from me. If we leave it in that place, that's literally going to put us in a negative state, basically for the rest of our life, if we allow it to.
So you made me think about, and you've said some words that like align with this several times in this conversation so far, but I do a lot of work with change, particularly behavioral change with people, how we want them to show up at work differently and that sort of thing. But we talk about something called the change curve, which is very, very similar to the grief curve, right? So it
Hmm.
starts out, and a lot of people find themselves stuck in the anger, depression spot, right?
Hmm.
And it's the most, to your point, right? That's the most negative place of that curve to get stuck in. And so I think about your work in particular, right, is about helping people come through that faster, but with acceptance being the highest point, or that we've made it through the curve, we're into the next thing or next change or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
What's your thought on that, moving through so that anger, experimentation into acceptance?
That's good.
Uh,
So it's really about this idea of, like, giving yourself permission to feel. It's because oftentimes if we have big emotions, there's such a negative connotation to anger. There's such a negative connotation to this idea of depression. And so, there's judgments. Like, it's, oh, if I'm feeling this way, I need like professional help, and I need like pills, and I need all that stuff, right? And if I've had my heart broken and I don't know how to move forward, I would say depression's a pretty natural state, right?
yeah.
It's like, yeah, like, I literally don't know what's next for me. So I have to basically sit in this and sort through the internal things going on before I can latch on to hope, right? And so I would say that's, given circumstance, if I've worked years towards something and then it's just gone, right? And I don't know where I'm heading, that lost feeling, and because that kills motivation. I don't know what actions to take anymore. I'm not sure who I am without this anymore. Like, there's so much that has to be reconciled in that process, that it's, well, do we need to judge that state? I think any normal human being would be feeling that way given the circumstances, right? And so We
Sure.
want to give ourselves permission to be like, yeah, I don't feel like doing anything today because I don't even know where to start. I don't even know what to do. And so we need time to be in it. And yeah, in that process, anger will come up. Because I'm going to be upset with other people or myself or something that's going to come up that's going to point to this idea of why this didn't happen. So I'm going to go through those phases too. So it's going to be a broad range of emotions. And anger is a fiery action emotion, but then if I get angry about something and then I have no idea what to move towards, then there's just going to be wasted kind of energy, and so I'm going to be left to be, oh, what do I do with this anger now, right?
Right.
So it's allowing to go through the waves of yeah, like I know I'm going to feel bad, I know I'm going to be upset about things, I know I'm going to feel like I don't want to get off out of bed or off the couch or whatever, but it's we give ourselves permission for a period of time. And once again, there's a spectrum to this, right? Like a smaller thing, it's that period's going to be a lot less. Yeah, let's say there was, with Olympians, this is a big one where it's, oh, I've worked my whole life for this and now there's nothing, right? Like, so that's probably going to take longer to recover from, because your entire identity is wrapped up in one idea, right? And
Sure.
now I have no idea I have to rebuild myself. I have to redesign myself. And that's a messy process, right? That's going to be filled with many different emotions because you almost become a machine when you have this specific target. It's just like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going for. And if I don't have that anymore, that's what that is. It's a big void. And so I have to figure out what to do. I have to reorient myself. I have to connect back to who I am and what I really want out of life. And all these are like big questions that are very hard. And they're all reflective questions, right? They're not actions. It's just me
Right.
having to be with myself. And many people are terrified to be with themselves, to be honest with you. That's why we have, the phone addiction, or it's alcoholism or whatever. It's just people trying to escape the current moment, right?
Right.
And so it's this ability to be with myself. That's how I create peace. If I'm depressed, I need to feel like, okay, yeah, it's in reality, I don't know what to do now. Okay. And so the question's always, well, I have to at some point get tired of feeling that way. And I have to be like, okay, well, I'm going to do something about it. And then, I probably need to take some small steps in some sort of direction. Just anything really, whatever interests you is probably helpful. I have to know that it's going to take a little bit to come out of that. It's not going to be an immediate thing. It's after somebody goes through a big breakup, generally
Sure.
you want to go through those motions. And then after a while, yeah, maybe you go hang out with friends. And then after a while, maybe you start dating a little bit. You give yourself an appropriate time frame to move through the experience, because it's just like you have to reorient your entire future, like because you were heading in one direction and now it's not there. And so I have to rebuild so many parts of myself, and they're all very costly from an energy perspective. Our subconscious, if I'm heading in a specific direction, my subconscious is always fueling those actions. But now if I don't know what I'm going towards, my mind doesn't have anything to work on. And so basically it's going to keep going back to my past, because
Okay.
that's where I'm stuck. And so that's the thing, is it's going to be, well, it's going to keep replaying these other things because I don't have the future to look towards now, right? So it's got to go somewhere. It's got to occupy itself. So I'm going to be ruminating on the past rather than, oh, yeah, this is where I want to head now, and so I'm going to start to try and figure out how to do that. Okay. And so that the past is where we're going to be hung up because we don't have a target anymore. The mind needs something to focus on. So it's going to go from our past experience in those instances.
If we're trying to move through this in a productive way and we have to be with ourselves and sit in the feelings and give ourselves permission to have the feelings that typically society would label as bad, do you have key actions or activities or something that someone can do to help move that through?
Yeah, I mean, a good one is, if we feel stuck and our brain's fixated on something, we do need some sort of activity. So, it's yeah, going for a walk or exercise is generally a healthy way to kind of snap out of things a little bit. Journaling and exploring. Okay, this is where visualizations and things like that can come in healthy. If I don't know what this brighter future is, I need to start to kind of play around with some ideas, and I can just start to imagine things, right? Like I can be like, oh, what if I did this? And then, let my mind play that out a little bit. Like I just need to give my mind things to focus on. So whether that's an activity or some sort of exercise to just get kind of some creative juices flowing, because that's what ultimately what we're trying to tap into is creativity to get out of that stuck past,
Sure.
because we need to create something new. And so that means I need to start to frame up in my mind something different than what I'm experiencing every day, which could be a hell, right? It could be like I feel miserable every day and I have no idea what to do. And so I need to, yeah, get some new experiences, try different things, just put myself out there in new ways to just try and mix things up a little bit to get some momentum going. Okay. Because yeah, if I just sit there all day and I'm just ruminating, like that's going to continue until I break that cycle. And so I need to just take some small steps in any direction. You don't need to have a specific direction. It's just, oh, just whatever might interest you. It's just kind of like, yeah, I'll go for a walk or I'll go to the park or maybe I'll go to the show. And then, yeah, you start interacting. You break the cycles by doing things different than your normal daily habits, right? And so if my daily
Sure.
habit is just sitting around thinking about the past, yeah, okay, well, that's a small bar. So I just need to go engage with people. I just need to get out there and do something a little bit differently. And I'll put myself in situations for new inputs to come into my system. I need to mix things up. I need to get some variety going. I saw a quote the other day. It's like this guy said, "Oh, like I wish somebody told me the cure for depression was just get out of the house, even if you don't want to."
Sure. Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Okay, I'm just sitting around, or I'm just going through I go to work and I come home and watch TV or whatever. It's like, okay, how can I break that cycle a little bit? Like, how can I step out, do something different, go engage with different people? Because that's going to create some new thinking, some new ideas. And that's really what we need when we're trying to engage in a creative process, which is like I'm trying to rebuild my perception of what my future is. So that is going to be, I need new stuff coming in. And whatever excites me, I want to start to latch onto that and be like, oh, okay, how can I take this further? What are some next steps I can take? Because I found this really interesting and it kind of got that spark going again. Right. So if I'm in a depression and something starts to excite me, that's a pretty good sign of like, I might want to follow that lead and see what happens.
Okay. This is going to feel out of order. But if what's in it for somebody, right, to not be doing all of those things, to not have the acceptance, right? I'm trying to think through like this idea of like some people resist change. It doesn't matter what it is, any kind of change, or they're going to resist whatever the reality of their situation is, even though they know they have no control over it or there's nothing they can do to make that thing different. It could even be, I'll just use another work example. It could be the changing of a system, right?
Mhm.
And so the company is going in this direction. They have purchased this very expensive piece of technology and every employee is going to use it. And yet there'll be a faction of people who will resist that at every turn, even though there's no change in it. There's no way to undo it.
Mhm. Well, it's our mind likes what's familiar, right? So, even if that's a familiar suffering, I'm going to latch onto that because I might just have such a negative connotation to the unknown that I just like what's predictable. And so it's very, very easy to zone out if I'm just doing the same things, right? And so it's really a lack of participation in life because it's kind of whatever I've lived, that's all I continue to live, and there's nothing else, right? And so that's just like a strong preference for what's comfortable. So that would be this idea of complacency or settling, where it's like, oh, like, you know, I guess my life's not so bad that I have to change, but it's not great either. But it's that middle ground of like, well, yeah, I can just exist here and it's fine. And I don't have to try too hard or I don't have to be too uncomfortable in any situation. So I'm just going to kind of replay things over and over again, and you kind of get lulled to sleep there. So the resistance to change is like, well, yeah, maybe I've been in that complacency so long that I forgot what it's like for something to excite me, or I forgot what it's to maybe have bigger thoughts or bigger dreams or goals or whatever it is. Or maybe I've never even had dreams or goals. Maybe I just went through the motions every step of the way, right? And so So this idea of excitement, um, that's going to be more of an artificial thing of like, oh, I do these things because it makes me feel. So if I'm numb emotionally, I don't have this huge variance in what I'm feeling. Okay. And
Sure.
so even if, what would excite that person, it would have to be something massive. But even if it did, it would spike that massive interest, but then it would immediately oscillate to the other side of it. So we operate in polarity. So even if I got excited about something, shortly after that, I would have a flood of doubts. I would have negative thinking that would come in and squash it. And so that's that where I get kind of terrified to move forward because the internal feedback gets dialed up where it's loud, where all the negative self-talk and doubts come in, where it's just like I can't actually be happy about things because I don't believe they're possible for me. So, it's a funny thing, because it's on the surface, you'd be like, oh, like, why wouldn't anybody want to change? Why wouldn't anybody want to get better? Those types of things. But, some people, it's like, it's just been one way their entire life. They've never had somebody come in and show them a different path, or they've never even been interested either, right? And so there's no really judgment on it other than it's just like, well, you can't force it. It's like it's either you have it or you don't, or you're interested or you're not. Some people do like the comfort, the going through the motions, the predictability of things. And that could have been born out of a lot of trauma. Could have been like a ton of pain of like, well, yeah, there's nothing I can do to change my life anyway. And so maybe they gave up on it a long time ago. There's many different reasons. Oftentimes they just haven't had a lot of models in their life that point to different conclusions, or people that have shown them higher possibilities and really believed in them as well. Because self-belief is going to be the driver of things. If I just feel like I deserve better, that's when I'm going to really reach for things. If I don't have self-worth, if I've been told like, maybe I'm worthless my whole life or something like that, those thoughts aren't even going to be happening because the level of negative self-belief would squash any idea of pulling out of that.
Sure. Do you see complacency and apathy as similar or different in this case? Because some of what you've said around complacency and even the word complacency feels like it could be akin to someone who's apathetic about a situation.
Yeah, I would say complacency is like a more of a general. I would say it's a less intense version. But, it's kind of
Okay.
this general comfort level that somebody likes to maintain, where they don't like too big of challenges or anything. But so they're going to have negative beliefs about growth and change, but it's not going to be so intense that it's almost going to be like they're not going to see the value in it, right? They're just going to be like,
Sure.
oh, like I'm not feeling that bad, so well, what's the benefit of doing this? Is it even worth it? That kind of thing. So they're going to be kind of more in like the middle ground of the negative, and somebody that's apathetic is just going to be somebody that's really given up, right? Where it's like, yeah, there's going to be a lot more pain behind that. There's going to be more of that. Yeah, just I'm going to avoid that altogether because it almost feels like there's no hope, right? So it's not that so somebody that's in a complacent mode, they might just be like, "Yeah, I could see maybe I could do that, but I don't see it as like as worth it." Where somebody in the apathetic would be more of like, "Yeah, that's not even possible." Like it wouldn't even occur to them because they're so far
Sure.
on the other spectrum that they've lost a lot of hope, and so it really is just baseline survival. It's not about even comfort anymore. So complacency is going to be comfort. Apathy
Okay.
is going to be like, yeah, just a general heaviness and pain on a regular basis where I don't feel like anything else is possible for me.
Okay. Okay.
So it's going to be a spectrum. And so acceptance is the middle ground, right? So it's like I'm coming to terms with things so that I can rebalance my mind. And so from that balance point, I can reorient myself to a different future. Okay. It's not
Sure.
because I'm working from a deficit, it's harder to come out of that. And so everything's just going to feel like work. But once I get to a place of it, like a neutral acceptance of something, okay, it happened, it's fine, I'm ready to move forward. Now it's like I can start to dial into like what does moving forward look like? And so that's the
Right.
key for acceptance is it establishes that balance point where I'm no longer working from a negative.
Right. So thinking about acceptance and how that might help somebody work through things that feel really difficult or hard for them. How do you see acceptance being a key part of solving, hard parts of your life or hard problems?
Hmm. Well, so acceptance is really this we're trying to drop into the present moment and be centered. And so if I'm not there, basically I'm in this place of resistance all the time, right? Where I'm almost like fighting reality. From that place, it makes everything harder. Even if I don't like what I'm experiencing, if I know it's going to be tough regardless, it is this idea of just the willingness to be like, okay, this is the situation. I'm going to get through it. And we have that positive reinforcement. And it's more about the self belief that we can handle things. That's why it's important to work out past circumstances because that provides us with positive feedback that I've gotten through hard things in the past and I've grown every step of the way, right? So but it creates this idea where I'm more willing to take on challenges and I'm more willing to accept them in the moment, which gives me that resourcefulness to push things forward and move through them in an efficient way. If I'm fighting it, if I'm dreading it, if I'm in this place of like, oh, I wish I didn't have to do it, or I wish this didn't happen, that's where I'm going to blame somebody else for it or whatever. Like that's all wasted energy, from a nervous system perspective, where it's highly inefficient. My mind's in a very negative place too. And so that's going to make the effort seem 10 times as hard. Right.
Sure.
And so this acceptance is simply giving us that neutral set point of, okay, I'm here. And so I might as well make the best of this situation, even if I don't like it. And so the more I'm able to do that, the more I see just about every problem is not that big a deal, right? And so that's the key mentally is we're just not dipping into the negative extremes, which also create a lot of tension and stress and resistance in the body. And so that makes me feel like I'm fighting. Okay, but if I'm just doing, now I'm present, I'm connected. Yeah, I got this got to get done. It can help to see a bigger purpose in it too. I'm doing this because of this, right? Like so if we can see how our actions are going to add up to bigger things, like that's also helpful. That's how we're going to shift into the positive, really, is to see the purpose in the action. If it's just this idea that this has to be done, I might as well do it with a good attitude too. That's
Right.
also helpful. So it's just this, and I would say it's healthy to when you encounter something you have a lot of resistance to. I would say it's healthy to just be like to take a few moments to just be like, oh, this sucks, and be in that place of resistance. And then once again, we want to switch it to be like, okay, we're just going to do it now, right? And
Right.
I saw a video on this a while back where a guy's like, yeah, like whenever a problem happens, like we give our team 10 minutes to like bitch about it, and
Yeah.
then from
Yeah.
that point, it's like, okay, we're going to accept it. Now we're going to move forward. I'd say that's a healthy thing because we're honoring this idea that, yeah, this is hard. I don't want to do it. And we're giving that resistance a voice temporarily, but we're not giving it the whole stage, right? It's just like, oh,
Right.
this is a phase I need to go through to get my grasp on it. And basically, I want to get to back to that neutral point of acceptance. And now it's like, okay, like, what's the best way to execute this? What's the best way to move forward? So that's the thing is it's through acceptance. It's just simply we're calming the system, we're getting in touch with reality, and then that's going to give us the most effective steps forward. So that's the main idea with the art of acceptance is like if I'm struggling with something, if I have a lot of resistance to it, how do I get to that place of peace about it, which is going to be the center neutral place? And then that's where I want to act from. If I'm acting from the deficit, if I'm acting from the negative place, it's going to be a lot harder and my results aren't going to be as good.
All right.
So that's it for today. Thanks for joining us.
Sounds good. See you later.
All right, bye.